This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Driving the entrepreneurial spirit, EntreCon 2019 on this edition of inStudio. Whether you are a startup or a large established company, an entrepreneurial spirit is crucial in today's rapidly changing business environment. Pensacola's EntreCon is an event where dreamers, leaders, and employees can learn and be inspired. On this edition of inStudio, we'll get perspective on what this year's EntreCon has in store, as well as discussing the business environment along the Gulf Coast. Since early 2016, David Deliman has served as Market Vice President for Cox Communications. Some of his prior roles at Cox include Director of Public Affairs and Product Communications Manager for high-speed internet. Earlier in his career, he worked as a news reporter and managing editor at a couple of local television stations, including WEAR TV3 here in Pensacola. Stacey Robello is a former Santa Rosa County educator turned entrepreneur. She is co-owner of Home Instead Senior Care. Her company helps provide home health care options for our aging population. Stacey is also involved with local organizations like Baptist Women's Board, Escarosa Senior Alliance, and Impact 100. Patrick Rooney describes himself as a serial entrepreneur. Over the years, Rooney, a CPA by training, has been deeply involved in numerous startups, working in key leadership roles and financial management roles. These days, he is the director of the business incubator Collab. Rachael Gillette is Chief Leadership Development Officer for Studer Community Institute, the organization responsible for EntreCon. In the past, she has worked as a mediator in the First Judicial Circuit in Pensacola, and for nearly 10 years, she was a barrister at law in England. Welcome. Well, this is like being on a plane, okay? And we've got like two pilots, okay? Because if my voice goes down tonight, David's got a lot of television experience. It's all yours, okay?
I got your back, Jeff.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us. I appreciate that. Rachael, let me begin with you. Give us kind of the 10,000-foot view. What is EntreCon?
EntreCon is a business and leadership conference that's hosted in Pensacola, Florida each year. We're on our 5th year this year. And we host it on the main stage in Pensacola Little Theatre. So about 450 people come from across the Gulf Coast to learn about business, entrepreneurship, how to be. This year's theme is how to be the best you can be. Mm-hmm. And that's you as an individual employee, you as a leader or a supervisor, or you as an organization. And we're really this year looking at the workplace of the future. 2020, we've been talking about it for a while, but it's just around the corner. So we're hoping at the conference to prepare everybody and make sure that 2020 can be a knockout year for our businesses here in town.
David, how did your organization, Cox, thought of as a large company, but certainly entrepreneurial spirit, and we'll talk a little bit later about kind of how the whole Cox organization came about. Sure. But why are you guys involved in this?
So we really believe in giving back to the communities that we serve, and we find that one of the ways we can do that is to be very active in the communities and sponsor events like this. So we've been a sponsor of EntreCon since the beginning because it's a way to help really foster and grow small businesses in our community. We're proud to serve anywhere from small mom and pop operations to large organizations that have tens of thousands of employees. And sometimes just having those local conferences, local events available where people can go get additional training, resources, networking, that's been a good business alignment for us, and it helps grow the local business community as well.
Patrick, you've been around for a long time in the entrepreneurial business. Talk a little bit about your experience with EntreCon.
EntreCon was a great news item. It was announced, I believe, before Co-work Annex was quite open at a great moment there. And I really think it brings a level of curriculum and speakers that are very powerful and very, very different for this area. Bringing out-of-town talent, leadership, and just some inspirational speakers that can't be matched in any other event in the area.
Stacey, you're on the ground floor, you run your own business. What kind of inspiration do you get from the event?
Well, being new in entrepreneurial business, I really needed some ideas. And so last year was my first year going. And I, really just needed just some different ideas of how to run the business. And for me, that was, going somewhere in my backyard. It just seemed like the best way to do it.
This is a project of Studer Community Institute. And of course, Quint Studer, well known as a great entrepreneur, certainly in Northwest Florida, but even more broadly than that. What was his thought process when he dreamed this up?
So I think, Quint is a man of vision, and what he's great at doing is casting that vision and telling the story so that other people can understand it. And our mission at Studer Community Institute is to improve the quality of life for people with this huge vision of making our community the very best place in the world. And by bringing a conference of this nature, wanting something that was live, local, and affordable. Those were the key aspects that we talked about when we started the conference 5 years ago. Quint is a national and international speaker, travels all over the country and the world talking and consulting. And so he knew what these conferences were like, and Patrick talked about these quality of speakers and the inspiration and the motivation and the learning. David showed about the curriculum. But it's so expensive. There are thousands of dollars to attend, and then you have to add travel and fly, accommodation on top of all that. And it just was not something that we found from our research that businesses in our community could do. They weren't getting the benefit, reaping the benefit of attending. So it's like, how can we do that? How can we bring that level of conference to our area so that the business owners, leaders, and in fact anybody, not just sending one person, the person at the top because it was so expensive, but making it affordable so that you could bring the whole team.
Right.
That was the goal. And so I think, over the years we've achieved that. We grew. We had about 125 in the first year when we started at the Rex Theatre, and now we're 450 at the Pensacola Little Theatre, and then our breakout venues too. So, and David, they have been a sponsor since the beginning with Cox, supporting us and seen the growth as well. So,
well, I think for us,
great.
to your point, we've sent people all over the country for different trainings, conferences, events. To be able to have so many of our leaders participate in this right in our own backyard is pretty incredible. And the caliber of speakers that they bring in is top notch. They are the same speakers that are traveling to other big events across the country. So to have those here, your whole team can go at a very affordable rate. Makes sense for everybody here.
What seems to me that's very attractive as well is not just the upper management or the leadership team getting to go, but the employees, the rank and file, or maybe a student or an aspiring young entrepreneur, and the networking opportunities. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of that.
Well, I was just going to say, with Home Instead, we do it's an international conference. It's in April of every year. Our home office is in Omaha, Nebraska. So it's not the easiest place to get to, especially here in Pensacola.
Right.
But we go every year because it really is a big deal. They bring in the big speakers. It's, very motivating when you get out of there. And, you feel like you're going to conquer the world whenever you leave. Well, all of a sudden we have this here in Pensacola. So if I feel like I can't get to Omaha for some reason to go to my international convention with Home Instead, I know that I can come to EntreCon and get the same spirit. And so for me, that's fulfilling. And I can bring my key players that are in my office. And that was something that's really hard to tackle. When you're going to Omaha and you're trying to take your key players out of the office, who's going to run the business when you're out? Right. So I can bring them to EntreCon. They can be gone for a day. And then I feel good about what they're getting. And then I know that the office is still being ran.
Patrick, talk a little bit about the importance of going to a conference like this and the networking opportunities and the kind of feeding off one another. You've been around, like I said earlier, a long time in the startup world. How important is that?
Well, one of the things that we try to educate our entrepreneurs at CoLab about is the power of networking. I share with them my first trade show event. It was a local Pensacola event. Used to be at the Bayfront Auditorium, no longer around. But I went there with the notion as a new entrepreneur of getting customers. And what I found was the power of meeting other firms, other people. I received a lot of resumes, so I found talent that I didn't know I might be able to tap. And I also found a few prospects. But in truth, it was the power of telling the story and actually practicing. Who are you? What do you do? In front of strangers that is very valuable. In fact, this year, CoLab is really pleased to have a session, a panel, a discussion that we're sponsoring at EntreCon. And we're providing 8 of our entrepreneurs have an interest in attending. We've never done that before, but I think it's a very powerful benefit as a plug for collab, I'd say. We do require as a term and a condition of being a tenant in collab that they will get engaged in our community, that they will participate, not only in the activities that we organize, but in the bigger community.
Go ahead and tell us what collab is exactly.
So collab was is a partnership of Pensacola State College and Florida West Economic Development Alliance. So we are at 418 West Garden Street, just a block and a half from Student Community Institute's facility down on Garden Street. As I like to say, we can collaborate very effectively at the little Greek restaurant, the midway between the two buildings, or Everman's. Great places for lunch. One of the benefits of being downtown, as it has grown and developed, is there are a lot of things to do. People walk around. So collab is about bringing in firms, entrepreneurial firms. There is a process of, is there a match for us? It is a program that is funded in order to build homegrown entrepreneurs and businesses. We are focused on economic development, which means we're looking for businesses who have 51% or more of their revenues being generated out of the MSA.
Okay.
So we're looking for people who import wealth, simply put. The purpose of that is to say we're going to accumulate wealth here and we are going to invest in wages, in equipment, and in facilities. We are a fairly short-term program. We offer a 5-year maximum time period with a maximum of 25 employees. So actually the way it truly is, it's an incentive program that says, come here in year 1. Yes, we do offer some space with some strings and terms and conditions, but it is a fairly discounted rate. Year 2, it's less of a discount. Year 3, it's about market. Year 4 and 5 are priced to motivate the entrepreneurs to learn to fly and jump out of the nest.
Okay.
And see some great success, Patrick, with Iris and with others. And what's cool is this year we've got Vivid Bridge, who is in the collab, one of the tenants, phenomenal startup. They're 2-3 years in, but last year we collaborated and we did the video with them, and they produced some phenomenal video for us to highlight and promote EntreCon, and they've stayed involved. So all the video that you see that promotes EntreCon is done by one of the tenants of the collab, Vivid Bridge, and it's just exciting to see. You know, we talk about sort of helping businesses grow, and one of the things that we had in the past with Pensacola was losing talent. You know, we can all remember that time when, gosh, all this talent was going away and we couldn't keep them. We certainly couldn't think about attracting businesses to the area. And that was one of the things that we were trying to address with the Institute as a whole and our leadership development program, but specifically with EntreCon, is providing something here that is part of that whole movement that we're creating to retain the talent that we've got and attract talent here. So, you know, Patrick talked about sort of the networking opportunities, and we've got a high caliber of not only speakers, but the people who come, the attendees. They're the people who are investing in themselves, their professional development of their businesses and their teams. So it's exciting to see the growth over the years when you see these businesses that kind of almost have started because of EntreCon. We've got so many great stories that people would come to EntreCon, have a business idea inside of them, hear a story by a speaker or another attendee about how they got started and then the struggles that they had, and think, gosh, well, it's inspired me to do it, and now I've found the connections and the motivation and the people who can help me get started as well.
I can attest to that. I mean, engagement is key. And, you know, retention and engagement are so closely related, but we really like to talk about engagement. And, you know, I like to think about working with the willing. And, you know, a lot of the people that come work with Home Instead, they're willing to come work. So what can I do for them to make them stay at Home Instead? And that was some things that I learned when I first came into this position, is that, you know, I want to be able to serve clients as best as I can, but I can't serve them unless my caregivers are happy. So how am I going to make them happy? How am I going to make them stay at Home Instead? Because turnover in home care is relatively pretty high.
Yeah.
50% of our caregivers have been with us for a year or more. So where's the other 50%?
Right.
Yeah, that's a big number. So my competition is not necessarily so many other home care companies. It's people like McDonald's or Taco Bell. So you're thinking about the wage of those salaries that people are making, but what are those other things that those companies are offering? Are they offering college tuition? I know we talked about that earlier. That might not be something I can offer, but I know I can offer a bonus. Or something that we're right in the middle of making is that we want to provide major medical for all of our employees. And that's going to be huge for us. But what can I do to keep them engaged? Because I want to make sure my clients are happy. And that's something I learned at EntreCon. And we have been putting that forth this past year. We're just about there on our goal.
And that becomes even more important in today's competitive job environment, for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Having a great conversation about EntreCon 2019, the business environment along the Gulf Coast, entrepreneurship, and all kinds of fun stuff. You're watching InStudio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Stay with us. Welcome back. Nice to have you along with us. This is InStudio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're talking about EntreCon and entrepreneurship. Our guests are Rachael Gillette, David Deliman, Patrick Rooney, and Stacey Robello. Stacey, let me get you to tell your story. How did you become an entrepreneur?
Well, so actually I worked in the business about 20 years ago. I was recruited by my mother, so I'm second generation owner. And she, had noticed, I'd already worked with seniors working at Baptist Hospital prior. And I really was drawn to working with seniors. It is also a personal story, too. I had, with my grandmother, we had to move her out of her home down to Pensacola. And, just seeing her being uprooted out of her home she had had for 30 years, it was a little bit overwhelming for her. So really combining both those things together, I started seeing, really what home care could do for seniors. So I did take a little hiatus. I was a teacher for about 5 years. That's what my degree is in. I came back to Home Instead in 2006 and worked for about 12 years. And then my mother decided to retire. So it was an opportunity for my husband and I to purchase the business. Right. And it's not an easy task. I feel like I can run a business better than I can purchase one. I don't think I'd want to do that again. It was a very stressful. The vetting was pretty intense. Not only with the state getting our license, but also going through Home Instead, because Home Instead Senior Care is a franchise. So they have to select who they want to run the business, because ultimately we are representing them here in this area. So anyways, fast forward, we did get the business, and Kaipo Robello is my husband, and we've been in business together for about 2.5 years. And
you said he actually had a pretty successful entrepreneurial track record prior to this, right?
Correct. So he's owned several businesses before, Aloha Screen Printing, Aloha Wine and Liquor, and the Shaka Bar. Okay. So not necessarily working in home care, it is definitely a way, he's switched gears completely. But he knows how to run a business. He knows how to manage a business. I know home care. So that was really a great marriage for us. So, really, ultimately, my job is to stay out, do the marketing, educate the community about Home Instead, and then he's in the office managing the office.
Let's talk about that a little bit. We were kind of joking about it, working with your spouse or your significant other, whatever the case may be, or family, brother, father, mother, whatever the case may be. Talk a little bit about what it takes to make that work. And I'll get everybody to inject on this.
It's tough. And it's interesting.
One day at a time.
Yeah, one day at a time. Yeah, that's and it's really one of the things, not specifically how to work with a spouse, but how to work with other people successfully. Is some of the things that we talk about during the conference, and giving you the skills to be able to do that. So understanding different people's leadership styles, communication styles, those kinds of things, and managing that. So it's
the Strength by Management class.
Right. Yeah, that's one of
ultimately a great experience. I did that through the Studer Community Institute. I learned a lot about myself, not only personally but professionally. And then I had my husband take the test as well. It's like, oh, okay, this is why opposites do attract. So, but we know now like what's best and how to communicate with each other. We don't talk shop after 5. Of course, unless it's an emergency.
Right.
But during the day, we just try to make decisions together. It's almost like your marriage. You need to learn to compromise. And so where I might be a little bit more knowledgeable in the home care, he's like, well, in my experience with businesses, this is what I need to do. But we come together and we figure out a way to make it happen.
Do you define your roles? I mean, have you defined your roles ahead of time to say, okay, I'm going to run this side, you run that side? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
So my job is more.
Yeah, having that clarity. I think in any situation, again, having just avoid so much conflict and confusion and clarity.
Right. I was thinking it ties back to what we talked about earlier with the networking too, about what you talk about. You come from 2 different career fields altogether, but a conference like this brings people of all different careers together in one common location. So it's not just networking with people in high tech, not just networking with people in home healthcare, not just networking with any one industry. You learn from all these other industries and build connections and build your network, which I think makes this conference even more powerful than an industry-specific one.
Yeah, really unique in that respect, because it is non-industry specific, and we have from, literally sort of the mom and pop, just one-man band, all the way up to big organizations, big employers like Cox, who bring their whole team. And Cox has sponsored for the 2nd year the awards. We do the EntreCon awards each year, and we're doing a luncheon again this year. And new family-owned business we've got. So we've got some great entries for family-owned business, as well as small, medium, large, and Entrepreneur of the Year. We just really want to celebrate, because it's hard. It's hard being in business, regardless of whether you're starting up like Patrick's dealing with and coaching and helping at CoLab, or you're in business with a spouse or a significant other, or maybe there's multiple generations. We hear that too. But it's really common to have those same type of stresses, and it's hard. So we love to celebrate them with the EntreCon awards.
And I think about Cox, and I don't know how many people really know this, but what a great entrepreneurial story that is, from the newspaper business to just a massive media empire to automotive, etc. David, just give us a little bit of a view of what the Cox company is all about and how it started.
Sure. So most people are familiar with Cox Communications, the division I work for, which is our broadband telecommunications. You think of it as cable, internet, telephone. But really, we're a much larger enterprise. Cox Enterprise is a 120-year-old company, still family-owned, started by a former school teacher.
Wow.
So an educator who ended up buying a newspaper in Dayton, Ohio, and grew a media empire with newspapers, TV stations, radio stations around the country, got into the automotive business. A lot of folks may not know that Cox also owns Manheim Auto Auctions, Autotrader.com, Kelley Blue Book, a lot of other automotive properties, trying to really redesign the whole automotive buying and selling experience from beginning to end. And then also we have the Cox Communications, my division as well. So it's neat to have a 120-year-old company that still has the family values still owned. We're run by the 4th generation great-grandson of Governor James Cox, who founded the company, and to still have that trickle down and be involved in the communities that we serve is pretty neat. And I think that really is what fosters some of our dedication and commitment to the entrepreneurial community.
I think what's kind of interesting about the organization too is just how they have diversified over the years. They didn't really get locked into traditional media. If you're ever in the Atlanta area, they have the Atlanta paper, WSB radio and television, among other things, but kind of how they expanded out and got into the cable business, and then really kind of breaking ground with the internet as far as the online automotive
Right,
business.
and now like looking forward to the next phase is really looking at what can we do in sustainability and things with conservation and the environment. So a lot of new investments are focused on that area as well. So the family's always been very focused on what can we do next? How can we make an impact on the world next?
And you know, relatively speaking, you're a huge organization. Sure. Okay, I in my real job work for a huge Fortune 500 company, and so one of the things that I always think about, how do you foster that entrepreneurship? How do you foster that creativity in a large organization? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we talk about entrepreneurship, and you know, kind of how do you foster that? And it goes to the engagement that you were talking about, that owner mentality. So an employee who's willing to go above and beyond and do more than just go in and collect the paycheck. And that's what makes a business sustainable in the long term, when you have people who are like that, who believe in the mission and the vision. And I think that's key.
I think setting that vision, and then also really listening to your employees.
Yes.
At the end of the day, your best ideas come from your frontline employees. They will tell you exactly what you need to do with your business. It doesn't come from the C-level down. You really need to listen to your employees, and you have to have good tools and some processes in place to help develop those. So very much inside the organization, similar to what it's like when you're developing a new business.
I just want to share this. Several years ago, I read an article, and I can't recall if it was in Fortune or Forbes, but it was one of the business magazines, and I can't recall. It was a couple of CEOs ago of the McDonald's Corporation. And I wish I would have saved this and posted it up and shared it with more and more people, but I'll share it on television right now. It made more sense than a lot of stuff. And the CEO at the time said, I like to remind everybody in the home office that we do not have cash registers at the home office. So in other words, pay attention to what's going on down at the stores. Pay attention to what's going on the front line. That is so important.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think especially, you know, we talked about the conference looking forward and preparing you for the workplace of the future now. With 2020 and more than half the workforce are millennials, and really not that whole structure of top-down leadership with all these different layers and command and control is gone, or it needs to be gone, because any successful business, it just can't operate like that anymore. So David, to your point, allowing for those frontline people, and regardless of almost how long they've been there or what their age is, to have a say, to have some input. That's where so many great ideas are. And we hear, you know, from some businesses where employees just get told, stay in your lane, don't do, and they're stifled. And those are businesses that are really not going to succeed or grow or attract talent, because especially these younger generations coming through want to feel like they're making a difference, that they're part of something, that their view counts.
Yeah, it's investing themselves into the business.
Patrick, you've been doing this for a long time, and you're a CPA, so you could obviously go work for a big accounting firm. What is it that draws you to the entrepreneurial world?
Well, exactly some of the things that were just discussed. I would say that my clients when I was with Deloitte in Atlanta were a small and medium business, which in that world meant under $100 million in revenues. That would be a huge business in Pensacola. But the complexities, the challenges that they were confronting were a great training ground to bring those skills and experiences back. Why I got out of public accounting was because I was in the private company advisory services group. I did a lot of auditing. I saw where I wanted to go in my long-term career. And it wasn't the path up to partnership, although next stop was a partner. I decided to leave and go to work for a client that was very entrepreneurial, very innovative. They were introducing products to teach English language skills in South America and Asia. So they had quite an interesting product roadmap, including adopting new technologies to deliver those services to their customers. So that's the first step I took out of public accounting, which then led me into a series of firms that were entrepreneurial, usually early stage, sometimes not too early, but maybe challenged by scaling. And suddenly they'd hit some limits where they needed some expertise to help them. What I really liked was making decisions in real time that had operational results that one could measure and you could track on strategic goals. Whereas being in the firm that I was in and in the role, and this is not to be negative, but it seemed like we were always coming in after the year was done, And then our job was to validate the data, the numbers that were being reported to investors, creditors, and the like. And I really wanted to be making those numbers happen more than just saying they were right.
And that's really interesting, Patrick, because that's a question that we hear a lot with the work that we do through the Studer Institute is, I'm at this stage, and it might be early stage growth, how do I get to the next level? Or if it's a big organization like Cox, we want to sustain, we want to scale these different things. So actually that's one of our speakers, Chad Henderson, who's on our board of directors, and Catalyst HRE, phenomenal success story, young man, I mean, God, I think just turned 40. Sorry, Chad. I don't think that's a secret. But, in our community, who is doing fantastic things and now really getting involved in the revitalization and regeneration of downtown. He's going to talk about scaling and growth, the difference between the two, and how to do it as well. And then Stacey, the personal stories, that's what everybody also enjoys. And you got motivated to get into what you're doing because of that personal story.
Absolutely.
And grandma, and we love hearing those, and our attendees love hearing them as well.
We're going to continue with these and other great stories in just a couple of moments. We're talking about EntreCon and entrepreneurship. You're watching In Studio on WSRE TV, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're coming right. This is In Studio on WSRE TV, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're discussing EntreCon and entrepreneurship. Our guest, David Deliman with Cox Communications, Rachael Gillette with Studer Community Institute, Stacey Robello with Home Instead Senior Care, and Patrick Rooney with CoLab. Let me throw this up as kind of a jump ball. Is there a particular personality type that makes a great entrepreneur?
Wow.
Somebody who's willing to take risks, I think, right?
Yes.
I think you've got to be willing to be able to take a risk and have that kind of faith. It's a leap of faith, and a lot of people, and they're passionate. A lot of entrepreneurs, I think, are technicians. That's how they start off. Maybe they're passionate about something, whatever reason it is, whether it's Stacey's story about, wanting to make a difference, or, gosh, we have, when I think about Perfect Plain Brewery, that's a story that started from EntreCon. DC Reeves and some college buddies were always, talked about going to open a brewery up, and then, but had jobs and real jobs. And how do you take that leap from doing that and going in? And EntreCon was the catalyst for them and others. Like, what do you think, David?
I think a lot of it's just being able to take a chance on something that nobody else sees in the market right now. Try something different, being willing to take that leap of faith out there. And that's the hardest thing to do, to go against the grain and try something different.
Yeah.
I would say something that was mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship. I think that is the beginnings of a person's mindset to make the leap out of their day job. Because there's a book that I promote, I know you know, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. So it talks about the three parts of being an entrepreneur, one being a technician. The technician then moves into supervision or management, and then they move into entrepreneurship. And I always tell people that's because once you move up in management, you begin to understand maybe those above you have feet of clay. Or sometimes you're in a stifling environment that is not supportive of innovation or creativity. We talked about those challenges too. So the folks that make that leap to entrepreneurship, besides risk-taking, I believe teachability, which guess what?
Love that.
EntreCon might have a solution for that.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a point, there are some people I think that are very good at starting businesses and getting them to a certain level. And then once the business gets to a certain level where a certain number of employees, revenue, et cetera, perhaps their skill set is no longer right for that. And you've probably seen this a fair amount in your experience. Yes. How do you determine if it's time to step away, that, hey, I'm the guy that fired this thing up, but now I need to turn it over to someone who maybe is a little better at making the trains run on time, so to speak? How do you start trying to define where that happens? You know where I'm going with this question?
Yes, scalability is a big challenge. The limitations of the entrepreneur and their self-development activities, those can be stunted by focusing on working in the business, as we say, versus working on the business. So generally the path for future success is when they begin to understand what they don't know, or maybe what they're not as skilled in, and they either invest in their own training and development, or they engage advisors and other professionals that can help them learn and strategize on what do they need to do and what makes business sense to invest in doing.
And that's really cool, because the speakers that we're going to have this year are going to tell their stories and have in past years about the willingness to be able to make mistakes and then learn from them. Right. So for that person who is maybe at that level and maybe struggling or whatever it is, you know, just being able to say, well, gosh, whether it's, you know, Emily Lay, who's spoken in the past, and say, well, you know, I went down this road and it didn't serve me well, and I had to stop and work on the business and work on myself. And, you know, it was really failure, but failure is okay because you learn and grow from it and go down that path. So that's what we try to do with the speakers, as well as those genuine stories. So it's going to be interesting. We've got some great speakers. Jake Paul from Disney coming this year. He's going to talk about a lot of the things. Being brilliant on the basics is one of his topics. So again, you know, some people think, well, gosh, you know, it's magic that makes this happen. Did you see what I did there? right. There he does. But you know what Jake is going to teach us is that it's really about consistency, which is what Cox does amazingly well. Focusing on the basics, getting those right,
doing them well,
and doing them well. Right. Yeah.
I think back to your point about what makes a good entrepreneur, I think the humility piece too, being willing to be humble and accept those mistakes and know you're not perfect. You don't have all the answers, but you're willing to take the feedback, learn from your mistakes, and then grow.
Yeah, interesting.
Absolutely. And looking for solutions. Well, you know, Tiffany Pham, who's coming as well, you know, she wanted to get into the business space, found it difficult as a female entrepreneur to get networked, and so taught herself coding and started this company, Mogul, and she's now been named by Entrepreneur as one of the most powerful women in the world. Wow. She's one of our speakers, and she's coming to EntreCon this year, and I'm going to share that, which I think is, pretty powerful stuff.
Awesome. I was just going to just give you some information about Home Instead. What's really interesting is, you know, it is a franchise. So there's like 1,100 offices worldwide. So the way that the business is structured, it is universal. So it's kind of funny, but it is like a business in a box when they give it to you. But really, you have to localize it. You have to make it your own. And so going back to knowing when someone else is ready to come into the business, this is a perfect example between my mom and I. You know, she's from the boomer generation, you know, didn't grow up tech savvy. So when things started to change in the business and we really started becoming, you know, I mean, everything now is, you know, digital. You know, even when the caregivers go into the home, they have to clock in on their phone. So things were changing so rapidly for her. I think it was harder for her to keep up. Whereas with me, because I grew up in that world, it was easier for me to take and move on and get that business up. Almost like we kind of joke, she was class of 99, I was class of 2017, kind of fast forward. But it was really neat because she recognized it, but she knew that I was a good fit. But she was also my mentor for so many years. So it was a perfect handoff between both of us. So everything I knew, she taught me, and then I was able to carry on.
You know, and that's interesting because I think you have to be open-minded enough and have enough, you know, security within yourself to say, okay, maybe I'm not the guy or girl to take this thing to the next level, but I need to find someone who maybe has those skills that I don't have. But at the same time, whoever's inheriting that needs to understand that, hey, this person that started this has a whole lot of assets and a whole lot of understanding that I may not have. I might have the technical knowledge, but perhaps I don't have some of the innate passion and experience that goes along with that. Speaking of things that people are often short of in the entrepreneurial business, it's capital. You know, and where is it, you know, how do people deal with that? What are your thoughts and ideas on where to go get capital, how to come up with enough money to make the machines run?
Well, if you read online or in the press about these fantastic stories of billionaires being created from entrepreneurs, you might be surprised that the data shows that most people finance their startups out of their own savings and credit cards. Before they go to venture capital or angel investment firms.
Right.
So I just put that out there for folks. I always tell entrepreneurs that the first thing they need to know is their FICO score, because bank loans are another top 3 or 4 sources of money, and a lot of entrepreneurs come to the table with great ideas, they think. Sometimes lacking serious market research or awareness, or even developing a prototype they've tested with customers. Those are all things that are a part of the success path, as opposed to just thinking your idea is absolutely wonderful and will be worth millions or billions. So where do you find money? We actually do have some angel funds in the Panhandle that some people might not be aware of, but there is a group called AIM Group, AIM. We have a chapter in Pensacola. This is a formalized angel group that meets monthly. There's a website for folks to apply, for due diligence to be done, for them to present themselves on a road tour. It comprised, I believe, of 8 cities, 1 in Northwest Florida, Pensacola, the rest in the state of Alabama. They've done several deals. They've been around for a few years now. More recently, a fund is being formed out of Panama City with the former Collab director as co-manager, with a gentleman, Mr. Steve Milloway. Her name is Kelly Reeser, the former director. Steve and I met as co-angel investors in a healthcare tech startup in Panama City several years ago. They're forming an angel fund, which they hope to launch sometime after the first of the year. So those are 2 that I might point out to people. There are some others in the area. They're sometimes hard to get to. IHMC has a fund that supports their tech transfer called Cobalt Intelligence. It's out there. There are a host of web resources like angel.co or gust.com. These are portals for finding angel funds that might fit your needs based upon your industry, your location, and again, a due diligence to your business plan. So there are sources of funds, but I would just stress that in general, statistics, metrics show most people start businesses with their own money or with their own capital resources from a banker or a credit card. So finding other people's money, OPM, it comes with a lot of detailed things that small entrepreneurs might not be ready for.
Right.
I have to go back. I tell entrepreneurs that if they're not having at least one humility building experience per day, they're not making enough decisions each day, because they are not going to make the right decision all the time.
Right, right.
And they just need to be teachable. They need to learn from what they're deciding.
And proceed with caution.
It is a very measured, process-driven approach, and I think sometimes that's what we try to deal with. And I know Quinn Studer and the Institute in their programs, there is a process, and it's fairly well developed these days. And if you follow it, you sometimes you just say, this is not a good deal, I shouldn't do this.
Right.
That's a positive outcome.
Right.
Although it might not appear that way.
Right. And that was the next question I was going to ask. How do you deal with someone who has an idea that they really have a lot of passion for, they really believe in it, they really want to do it, but you just know this is probably not going to work? How do you say to them, I don't want to throw a wet blanket on your passion, but it's time to back up and kind of re-gear, redesign the plan, the idea, without just throwing the wet blanket on it?
Yeah, I think for me it's asking those intelligent questions so they almost come to the realization themselves. And the reality is, and another reason why we do the leadership development program at the Institute, we're starting another initiative, the Pensacola initiative, to help entrepreneurs and bring the ecosystem together. And then EntreCon is to be able to provide those resources so that we can stop businesses from failing, because the vast majority of them do within, I think the first 5 years, Patrick, yeah. So getting them over those, maybe even not starting in the first place by asking them the intelligent questions, and then they realize, gosh, it's tougher than they think, because it's heartbreaking, and that's something I know that we really, when you see a business get started with passion and enthusiasm, it's heartbreaking when they fail. Another thing that we're doing at the EntreCon Awards is bringing in a speaker who's going to talk about the importance of doing the market research, and that's finding out the need for the market, and then if there is a need, also location, really key in terms of making sure that you have a good business. So he's going to be talking about that at the awards ceremony, and actually providing a scholarship. We haven't announced that yet. That's breaking news. But it's somebody that Quint brought in as part of the Building the Vibrant Community, and became so enamored by what was happening in Pensacola and wanting to be part of it and give back, announcing a scholarship for his services to help another business grow and succeed next year. So that's exciting too.
I think one of the things Stacey talked about earlier was having a mentor in her mother, and how key that was in the growth of your business.
Yes.
I think that having a good mentor is really critical for any business as they're growing, and that's where you can find a mentor in some place like EntreCon or through these different resources in the community, because that's somebody who can give you that honest feedback, like this isn't going to work this way, but let's help think through who I can introduce you to, or how we can rework your plan to take it a different direction. Structured corporations often have very formalized mentoring programs, just as important on the entrepreneurial side as well.
Even when I was teaching, we had mentors.
Right.
They want their teachers to stay, so it's still the same idea. I think, having someone that you can lean on and someone that can really just be honest with you, I think that is really key.
Yeah,
A key for everybody. We're talking about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, but we're going to have just as many, if not more, employees at the conference, and that applies equally. Making sure that you have good mentors and that support to be able to grow and kind of progress in your career as well. It's a good point.
We are going to continue this great conversation about entrepreneurship and EntreCon 2019 coming up in November in just a couple of moments. This is In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back to In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. Our topic, EntreCon and entrepreneurship. We were talking a few minutes ago about capital and just entrepreneurship in general, where you may get help and motivation. And you brought something up in break, SBA, Small Business Administration. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, what's been your experience with them?
Well, so whenever we went to purchase home instead, we went to a local financial institution, and they suggested that we went through the SBA. And so we did contact the SBA up at UWF, and it was a great segue trying to figure out what kind of loan we needed. There were some hoops we had to jump through, and they really wanted us to give that skin in the game. So going back to putting in your own money, right. They want to make sure that you're in. But it was a great experience. SBA was very supportive. The people that we worked with, they were so patient, and I just can't say enough about them. I mean, if it wasn't for SBA, I wouldn't be sitting right here.
And I think too that it's certainly appealing to think about getting other people's money, but if you're not really savvy about it, they may get more of your business than you're bargaining for. Yes. If you're not careful. And because you're dealing with some sophisticated folks there in most cases. And so that's a little word of caution, perhaps.
Very politely put.
Yeah. Anyway, Rachael, we were starting to talk a little bit about as the conference gets closer. So it's coming up in November.
Yes. Yeah.
The 13th and 14th.
14th. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of give us a layout of what we can expect and how someone, if they want to get involved, what they should go about doing at this stage in the game.
Absolutely. So, tickets are still on sale. The price increase is November 1st, so we need people to jump on those as quickly as possible. And 2 full days of conference. Like I said, main stage where we have our keynotes is at Pensacola Little Theatre, and we kind of bookend the day with the big speakers and the keynote sessions. And then we give people a choice in the afternoon. We have 3 different locations, and they could pick and choose. They don't have to sign up ahead of time. They could just decide which one they want to go to. And there we get a little bit more granular. We go deeper, and so look at the tracks are better jobs, better lives, and better futures. So we're looking at things, really the big picture of what it's like to be a business owner or leader or employee in today's world, 24/7. Cox does not stop.
Right. Always on.
Always on. At 5 o'clock. There are some people that go home, but there's an awful lot of people who are still there at 5 o'clock in the morning, right?
Exactly.
So with this 24/7, we're also focusing, and Stacey, it goes to your point as well about investing in the employees and making sure that we're saying, okay, well, we care about you as a person, and what does that look like? So things like focusing on health and wellness and those programs you were talking about, Stacey, about bringing in. I know that Cox has some great ones, and meditation and mindfulness. We're doing yoga this year, which is new. One of our young entrepreneurs has a new yoga studio, Disco Lemonade, great name. It's in South Turn. But so free yoga sessions each morning. Again, kind of that holistic approach, and then these 3 different tracks that people can choose from as well. And then of course the Entrepreneur Awards, we're going to be celebrating our local businesses, and some great networking events in the evening, both nights. We've got one that's sponsored by Clark Partington at their fabulous new offices in downtown Pensacola, and then the other one is at the Institute, because it's our fifth year. So we're having our big 5-year birthday bash that's sponsored by App River and Digital Boardwalk, who have been long-time sponsors. And so we're going to have a party on the second night, and we're going to round it all off with this great networking event. And we want everybody who's been to EntreCon to come to that and have some fun. So it's not just business and learning, but it's really networking, connections, and having some fun. And refilling, we hear from the people who attend about sometimes they didn't realize, but they felt drained, and the conference, fills them mentally but spiritually as well.
Yeah. We were talking in the green room before coming on set, and all of us were talking about how Pensacola in particular, but certainly Northwest Florida, but how Pensacola has changed in the past 2 decades. And you talk about that little downtown corridor there where Clark Partington is now with the new building, and just everything going on, and there's a level of energy, and there's a level of just people are people want to be here. People want to be here now. People aren't looking for a way to get out of here. People are looking for a way to come in. Would you agree?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Whenever we have folks come in from Atlanta or Baton Rouge or other parts of our organization, they're amazed when they see how much Pensacola has grown up over the last 15 to 20 years. And then to have something like this, such a signature conference right downtown where everything's walkable, you have multiple different venues, but it pulls it all together in one event for over a 2-day period. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we had Angelina's restaurant open there just opposite Southtown, and the general manager there was talking about wanting to get this basically celebrity chef James Moscone from New York to come to Pensacola, and 20 years ago that would have been a really hard sell. But he, came, saw what was going on, and it was pretty easy to get him and his wife to move from New York to Pensacola. So instead of that drain of people leaving, now we're seeing people coming here, and then all the awards that we've been winning about, best place to start a business or to live or
retire, everything.
Yeah, really encouraging.
I was kind of impressed. I was talking to someone who recently moved here from Northern California, and they said, funny thing about it is we were in a large major metropolitan area in Northern California, and we were kind of hoping to get this certain vibe of a life there, and actually we're getting it more in Pensacola than we were there with the walkability and things of that nature. So it's really fascinating. It's inspiring of what has how this city is just remaking itself.
It is.
And not just physically.
Right.
But you know what's happened? The personality and the personalities in the city. It's a whole different vibe.
I think we used to talk about, well, we've got great potential, but here's all the reasons why not.
Yeah.
And now that mind switch has changed to say, wow, here's all the reasons why we can do it.
Yeah.
And focusing on that. So that kind of shift in the thought process of saying, well, let's find a way to do it. And people coming together and collaborating, and again, that sort of, rising tide lifts all boats. So instead of that competition win at all costs, it's like, let's help each other as businesses.
It's exciting times in Pensacola.
Really
There's
is.
no doubt.
No question. I want to ask each one of you something here real quick. I like books. I like success stories. I love to read about great accomplishments. So as I work around the table here, I got about 2 minutes or less. Give me a great book you would recommend to somebody. David, I'll start with you.
Don't start with me.
Okay, I'll start with Rachel.
Oh, it's got to be Quint's new book. Quint Student's new book, The Busy Leader Handbook. It's phenomenal. It's out now, and he's speaking about it at EntreCon.
Awesome.
So, he's next.
Right now I'm reading a book called Strategic Doing, which I recommend.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to jump in because I'm working on a couple of them right now. And you mentioned Disney. So I'm reading Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime. Okay, so the CEO of Disney, and I thought what was really cool is he is talking about how he went in and bought Pixar. You're talking about a kind of an entrepreneurial type business being folded into a big major corporation, and also Lucasfilm and Marvel and stuff. Great, fascinating story. And then the other one I think that entrepreneurs will absolutely love, and this guy is just he's a piece of work. I love him. Ken Langone, okay, one of the founders of Home Depot, a book called I Love Capitalism: An American Story. This guy is great. Wow. And by the way, check out what this guy is doing for medical students at NYU. Okay, I mean, you're talking about somebody that became successful in giving back. I mean, is absolutely amazing. Like Mr. Studer has done so much of becoming super successful in giving back and being kind of the spark that fires off this community in so many ways.
Well, his previous book about building vibrant communities was so powerful, and it really tells Pensacola's story, and the fact that our story here that we were just talking about is now being used in other communities around the country is pretty impressive. That's neat for Pensacola to be that model.
It really is. Thank you all so very much. We did this last year. I'm glad we got to do it again this year. Hopefully we'll do it again next year. Hopefully I won't have a head cold when we do it. Thank you all so very much for watching. Thank you for coming in. It was wonderful. We've been discussing EntreCon 2019, which is coming to downtown Pensacola, November 13th and 14th. More information is available at entreconpensacola.com. Our guests have been Stacey Robello with Home Instead Senior Care, Patrick Rooney with CoLab, David Deliman with Cox Communications, and Rachael Gillette with Studer Community Institute. This program will be available soon online at WSRE.org as well as on YouTube. Please feel free to share. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. I wish you all the very best. Take wonderful care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.